I'm attending the symposium on Noah's Ark, studying the geology of the Ararat region.
Have you ever wondered what life was like before the great biblical flood? The early chapters of Genesis paint a vivid picture of a world vastly different from ours. A world of divine interactions, extraordinary lifespans, and a closeness with God that feels almost tangible. Let's dive into this mysterious epic, exploring the dawn of humanity, the intriguing lives of Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, and the precursor to Noah's journey. Ready for a trip back in time? The dawn of humanity. In the beginning, there was a world unblemished by time, untainted by the complexities of modern civilization, a world where the genesis of humanity unfolded under the watchful eyes of the divine. This epic, often shrouded in layers of interpretation and myth, is chronicled in the earliest chapters of Genesis, offering a glimpse into a time that seems both alien and intimately familiar. Imagine a canvas painted with the broad strokes of creation, where Adam and Eve stand as the central figures of a nascent human story. Their existence in the Garden of Eden marks not just the physical birth of humanity, but also its spiritual awakening. This garden was more than just a dwelling. It was a sanctuary, where the line between the divine and the mundane blurred, where conversations with God were as natural as the rustling leaves. The world outside Eden, though scarcely mentioned, must have been a wilderness unmarked by human influence, a vast expanse waiting to be explored and understood. But within the confines of Eden, life was a harmonious blend of simplicity and divine connection. The biblical narrative suggests a life of ease and abundance, where the only imperative was to live in accordance with God's will. Then came the pivotal moment, the fall. The act of disobedience by Adam and Eve set in motion a series of events that would forever alter the course of human history. It wasn't just about the consumption of forbidden fruit. It was a fundamental shift in the relationship between humanity and the divine. The fall introduced concepts like sin, shame, and mortality into the human experience, adding layers of complexity to an erstwhile straightforward existence. In the aftermath of the fall, we encounter the stories of Cain and Abel, figures emblematic of humanity's moral and spiritual struggles. Cain's act of fratricide, driven by jealousy and anger, is the first recorded instance of human violence, a stark contrast to the peace of Eden. This tragic episode underscores a growing rift between humanity's potential for good and its capacity for evil. But the narrative of early humanity isn't just a tale of downfall, it's also a story of resilience and adaptation. As Adam and Eve's descendants multiplied, they spread across the land, encountering and overcoming challenges that were inconceivable in Eden. They learned to cultivate the land, to harness the resources around them, and to build the foundations of what would become complex societies. This era was also marked by extraordinary lifespans, with individuals living for several centuries. Imagine the wealth of experience, knowledge, and wisdom accumulated over such long lives. These long lifespans hint at a closer connection to the divine and a world that was, in many ways, more conducive to sustaining life. The interactions between humans and the divine during this period were more direct and frequent than what we see in later biblical narratives. People like Enoch, who walked with God, exemplify a level of spiritual intimacy that is hard to fathom in contemporary terms. These relationships suggest a world where the boundaries between the sacred and the profane were more porous than they are now. As humanity spread and grew, so did its understanding of the world. This was a time of firsts, the first cities, the first acts of agriculture, the first forays into art and culture. Each step was a venture into the unknown, guided by a blend of divine inspiration and human ingenuity. Yet this growth was not without its pitfalls. The dawn of humanity was also a time of escalating moral and spiritual crises. The freedom to choose, granted to Adam and Eve, carried with it the potential for both great good and great evil. And as the population grew, so did the complexity of these moral dilemmas. Human society began to grapple with issues of justice, governance, and community living. Challenges that would continue to evolve and shape the human story. The role of the fallen angels. In the unfolding narrative of humanity's dawn, a significant yet enigmatic chapter is dedicated to the fallen angels. These celestial beings, once pure and residing in the heavenly realms, chose a path that dramatically altered not only their fate, but also the course of human history. The story of the fallen angels begins with their existence in a state of divine grace, as beings of light and purity. They were the epitome of celestial splendor, serving the divine purpose in the heavenly courts. However, amidst this celestial harmony, a discordant note was struck, leading to one of the most dramatic episodes in spiritual lore. The catalyst for this celestial rebellion was Lucifer, an angel of unparalleled beauty and wisdom. Lucifer, whose name means light-bearer, was a paragon among angels, adorned with every precious stone and perfect in beauty. Yet it was this very perfection that sowed the seeds of pride and ambition. In a tragic twist of fate, Lucifer's aspiration to ascend above his station, to be like the Most High, led to his downfall. The Bible poetically captures this descent in the book of Isaiah, where Lucifer is described as falling from heaven like a star from the sky. This rebellion was not a solitary act. Lucifer, now Satan the adversary, persuaded a third of the angelic hosts to join his cause. This celestial insurrection, a war in the heavens, was not just a battle for supremacy, but also a challenge to the very nature of divine authority. The fallen angels, in choosing to follow Satan, embraced a path antithetical to their original purpose. The consequences of this rebellion were catastrophic. The fallen angels were cast out of heaven, losing their place in the celestial hierarchy. Their fall transformed them, both in essence and in purpose. Once bearers of light, they became agents of darkness, their divine attributes twisted into instruments of deception and malice. The impact of the fall of these angels extended to the earthly realm. The book of Genesis, though sparing in details, hints at the interaction between these fallen beings and humanity. The presence of the fallen angels on earth introduced a new dynamic into the human story, one that was fraught with spiritual peril. One of the most intriguing and controversial aspects of this interaction is the account of the sons of God and the daughters of men in Genesis 6. This passage has been interpreted in various ways, but one prevalent view is that it refers to the union of fallen angels with human women, resulting in the birth of the Nephilim. These hybrid beings, part human and part divine, were renowned for their strength and stature, often described as giants or mighty men of old. The involvement of the fallen angels in human affairs did not end with the Nephilim. Throughout the biblical narrative, they continue to play a role as tempters and deceivers, working against God's purposes for humanity. Their influence is seen in various forms: spiritual deception, moral corruption, and the promotion of idolatry and false religions. The New Testament further elaborates on the fate of these fallen beings. In the epistles of Peter and Jude, we find references to angels who sinned and are now kept in chains of darkness, awaiting judgment. This notion of divine justice serves as a reminder of the ultimate accountability of all beings, celestial or otherwise. The legacy of the fallen angels is a complex one. On one hand, their story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and rebellion against divine authority. On the other, it is a narrative about the interplay between the spiritual and the material, between the celestial and the terrestrial. The fallen angels, in their interaction with humanity, brought about a profound alteration in the spiritual landscape. Their influence can be seen as a catalyst for both human sin and human striving. In the face of this celestial opposition, humanity's journey towards redemption and understanding takes on a greater significance. Human disobedience and its consequences. The saga of human disobedience and its profound repercussions is a pivotal chapter in the narrative of humanity's early history. This story, rooted in the biblical accounts, is not just about the initial acts of defiance, but also about the cascading effects these had on the human condition and the world at large. The genesis of human disobedience can be traced back to the idyllic Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve lived in harmony with nature and under the benevolent guidance of God. This tranquility, however, was short-lived. The act of disobedience, often symbolized by the eating of the forbidden fruit, marked a fundamental shift in human existence. It was an act that introduced knowledge and awareness, but at a great cost. This first act of rebellion had immediate consequences. Adam and Eve, now aware of their nakedness, felt shame for the first time. This emotion, unknown in their previous state of innocence, signified a deeper change, a loss of simplicity and a newfound complexity in their relationship with each other and with the divine. Expulsion from Eden followed, a poignant metaphor for the loss of direct communion with God and the entry into a world where survival would require toil and struggle. The consequences of this initial disobedience were not limited to Adam and Eve alone. The narrative quickly expands to their offspring, illustrating how sin and its effects can ripple through generations. The story of Cain and Abel, the first children of Adam and Eve, is a stark example. Cain's jealousy of his brother Abel led to the first act of murder, a brother killing his brother. This act of violence was more than just a tragic family dispute. It was a manifestation of the deeper moral and spiritual corrosion that had entered the human heart. The mark of Cain, which followed his banishment, symbolizes the lasting impact of sin, not only a personal moral failing, but a stain that would affect human relationships and societies. Cain's lineage, as depicted in the Bible, is marked by further acts of violence and defiance, suggesting a perpetuating cycle of sin and its consequences. This period also saw the rise of other moral and social complexities. As humanity multiplied and spread across the earth, so did the manifestations of disobedience. People engaged in deceit, exploitation, and, increasingly, in idolatry. The distance between humanity and the divine, initiated in Eden, seemed to widen with each generation. The moral decline of humanity reached its zenith with the episode of the Tower of Babel. This story, laden with symbolic meaning, illustrates the human desire to reach the heavens, a metaphor for the aspiration to rival God. The resultant confusion of languages and the scattering of peoples across the earth serve as a metaphor for the fragmentation and disunity that sin can cause in human communities. In the midst of this moral chaos, there were still flickers of hope and righteousness. Figures like Enoch, who walked with God and was taken to heaven without experiencing death, stand in contrast to the prevailing moral decay. These individuals serve as reminders that despite the widespread disobedience, the possibility of a righteous life, in communion with the divine, remained. The consequences of human disobedience culminated in the narrative of the Great Flood, a cataclysmic event that represented both divine judgment and a reset of creation. The flood, as described in Genesis, was not just a punishment for humanity's sins, but also a cleansing of the corrupted world. It symbolized a fresh start, a chance to rebuild humanity on a foundation of righteousness and obedience. The story of Noah, who found favor in the eyes of God, underscores the potential for redemption even in the darkest of times. His obedience and faithfulness, in stark contrast to the prevailing disobedience, highlight the enduring potential for human goodness and the possibility of a renewed relationship with God. The spread of humanity and sin. As the descendants of Adam and Eve multiplied and spread across the earth, the narrative of human history became increasingly complex. This chapter delves into the proliferation of humanity after their expulsion from Eden and the accompanying spread of sin, marking a period of significant transformation in the early world. After the tragic events of Cain and Abel, humanity began a journey of expansion and diversification. The Bible chronicles this progression with genealogies tracing the lineage of Adam through Seth, illustrating a growing population exploring and inhabiting new lands. This expansion was not just geographical, but also cultural and social, as the early humans developed various ways of living, adapting to different environments, and forming the earliest communities. However, this growth came with its challenges. The more humanity spread and evolved, the more complex their societies became, and with this complexity came an increase in moral and ethical dilemmas. The initial disobedience in Eden had set a precedent, and as people multiplied, so did the instances of sin and moral transgressions. From deceit and betrayal to violence and corruption, the tapestry of human behavior grew darker. The Bible provides glimpses into this period through narratives that highlight both the achievements and the failings of early humans. The city of Enoch, built by Cain and named after his son, represents the early advancements in architecture and urban planning. This development of cities indicates a move towards organized societies, but also a move away from the simplicity and direct divine connection of Eden. As societies became more structured, new forms of sin emerged. The complexities of human interactions in these early cities likely gave rise to issues of injustice, greed, and power struggles. The Bible does not shy away from depicting these realities, with stories that highlight both the potential for greatness in humanity and its propensity for wickedness. One of the most significant markers of this period was the development of various skills and professions. Genesis mentions individuals like Jubal, the father of all who play the harp and flute, and Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. These references indicate a diversification of skills and the rise of artistry and craftsmanship, contributing to the richness of early human culture. However, alongside these developments, the moral and spiritual decline continued. The Bible recounts the increasing wickedness of humanity, where every intention of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. This depiction suggests a world where sin had become pervasive and systemic, affecting every aspect of human life. This era also saw the rise of giants, the Nephilim, a mysterious and controversial topic in biblical scholarship. The presence of these beings adds to the complexity of the period, representing a further blurring of the lines between the divine and the human, and perhaps symbolizing the extraordinary challenges of this time. Amidst this backdrop of growing sin and complexity, there were still instances of righteousness and faith. The Bible speaks of figures like Enoch, who walked faithfully with God and was taken up to heaven, and Noah, a righteous man blameless among the people of his time. These individuals stand as beacons of hope, showing that even in times of widespread sin, it was possible to live a life of virtue and closeness to God. The culmination of this period of human expansion and moral decline was the Great Flood, a divine response to the corruption and violence that had engulfed the world. The flood represents both a judgment on the rampant sinfulness and a cleansing of the earth, paving the way for a new beginning with Noah and his family as the progenitors of a renewed human race. The longevity of early humans. One of the most fascinating aspects of early human history, as narrated in the biblical account, is the extraordinary longevity of the first generations of people. This era, characterized by individuals living for several centuries, offers a unique window into the early human experience and the implications of such prolonged lifespans on society and personal existence. The biblical narrative, particularly in the book of Genesis, provides startling figures for the ages of the early patriarchs. Adam, the first man, lived for 930 years. His son Seth lived for 912 years, and so on, with several generations living lives that spanned centuries. This phenomenon of extended lifespans poses intriguing questions about the nature of human life in the antediluvian, pre-flood world. One perspective is that these extended lifespans reflect a closer proximity to the original creation, where the human body and the environment were in a state of near perfection. In this pristine world, free from the accumulative effects of sin and environmental degradation, humans were able to live longer, healthier lives. This idea is supported by the gradual decrease in lifespans post-flood, as recorded in the biblical genealogies, suggesting a world increasingly distant from its original state. The implications of such long lives are profound. Imagine the depth of wisdom and experience accumulated over centuries. Individuals would have witnessed immense changes in their environment, societies, and even in the development of human culture and knowledge. This continuity of experience could have contributed to a rich oral tradition with histories, lessons, and wisdom passed down through generations. However, these extended lifespans also presented unique challenges. The long duration of life meant that the consequences of one's actions, both good and bad, could be felt for centuries. Familial and societal dynamics would have been significantly different, with multiple generations coexisting for extended periods. This could have led to complex social structures and possibly contributed to the entrenchment of certain ideas and practices, both positive and negative. The presence of such aged individuals in society likely had profound spiritual implications as well. With longer lifespans, the patriarchs could have served as living links to the earlier divine revelations and events, such as the memories of Eden or the teachings of Enoch. Their long lives would have been a testament to the enduring mercy and patience of God, even in a world slipping further into sin. The biblical narrative of these long lives also serves as a backdrop for the increasing moral decay of humanity. It is poignant that even amidst such extended opportunities for growth and development, humanity gravitated towards sin and disobedience. This contrast between the potential for greatness and the reality of moral failure is a recurring theme in these accounts. One cannot discuss the longevity of early humans without mentioning Methuselah, who lived for 969 years, the longest lifespan recorded in the Bible. His life, spanning almost a millennium, represents the pinnacle of human longevity and serves as a bridge between the initial generations of humanity and the flood. The end of Methuselah's life coincides with the onset of the flood, symbolizing the end of an era and the beginning of a new phase in human history. The eventual decline in human lifespans after the flood can be seen as a reflection of the changing conditions of the post-Diluvian world. As humanity adapted to new environments and faced different challenges, the natural lifespan shortened, marking a new stage in human development. Spiritual decline and the Nephilim. In the tapestry of early human history, a period marked by both spiritual decline and the enigmatic emergence of the Nephilim stands out as particularly intriguing. This epoch, nestled between the initial stages of human expansion and the advent of the Great Flood, is characterized by a profound deterioration in spiritual values and the appearance of these mysterious beings. The Nephilim, mentioned briefly in the book of Genesis, have been the subject of much debate and fascination. Described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, they are often portrayed as giants or mighty warriors of old. The identity of the sons of God is a topic of scholarly debate, with interpretations ranging from fallen angels to the descendants of Seth. Regardless of their exact origin, the presence of the Nephilim symbolizes a significant aberration in the natural order, a blending of the divine and the human that had profound consequences. The era of the Nephilim coincides with a period of widespread spiritual decline. As humanity grew in numbers and spread across the earth, their moral and spiritual bearings seemed to wane. The biblical narrative paints a picture of a society increasingly consumed by violence, corruption, and a departure from the divine teachings handed down since the time of Adam and Eve. This decline was not just a matter of individual transgressions, but indicated a systemic collapse of spiritual values. This spiritual decay is starkly illustrated in the biblical account of human behavior during this time. Genesis describes the state of humanity as one where every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. This description suggests a profound perversion of the moral compass that was initially instilled in humanity. The rampant wickedness and moral degradation signified a deep disconnection from the spiritual ideals that were meant to guide human conduct. The presence of the Nephilim is often interpreted as both a symptom and a catalyst of this spiritual decline. Their extraordinary strength and stature, as well as their likely dominance in society, could have contributed to the escalation of violence and moral depravity. Furthermore, the very act that led to their creation, the union of the sons of God and human women, represents a breach of the natural order, a defiance of the boundaries set by the Creator. The spiritual decline of this period had far-reaching consequences. It led to a world so corrupt and violent that it necessitated divine intervention in the form of the Great Flood. This cataclysmic event, as described in the Bible, was not just a physical deluge, but also a moral and spiritual cleansing of the earth. The flood represented a divine reset, an eradication of the corrupt order, and the establishment of a new beginning with Noah and his family. The story of Noah, in the midst of this spiritual chaos, stands as a beacon of hope and faithfulness. His righteousness and obedience in a world given over to wickedness underscore the possibility of maintaining spiritual integrity even in the most challenging circumstances. Noah's life and actions demonstrate that despite the overwhelming tide of moral decay, individual choices and steadfast faith can prevail. In retrospect, the period of spiritual decline and the Nephilim serves as a powerful narrative about the dangers of moral and spiritual corruption. It is a cautionary tale about the consequences of straying from divine principles and the inherent risks of tampering with the natural order. This chapter in human history is a reflection on the fragile balance between human free will and divine mandate, and the profound impact that this balance has on the course of human destiny.